Restaurants and romance, empire and opera, fun, surprising experiences at every one of the more than 300 stops on the metro. My name is Lisa. I'm a writer and tour guide. I carry a Canadian passport, but all we'll need is a ticket for the metro system as I show you historic, inspirational, endlessly fabulous Paris. I'd like to share my love for this spectacular city with you, one stop after the next, by way of the exciting Paris metro system. So grab your French phrasebook and put on your walking shoes. We're going to Paris. Next stop, Gambetta. We're in the outer limits of Paris today, exploring the neighborhood surrounding the Gambetta metro station. This is Belleville, a traditional working-class neighborhood in Paris, gateway for newcomers and a haven for creative types. This is where legendary Edith Piaf was born, the singer who brought French music to the world. Belleville is also the site of the first workers' cooperative from 1877, in an area where aristocrats of the 18th century were building lovely small houses. We'll visit one of the few Art Deco churches in Paris and check out the largest green space in the city, Père Lachaise Cemetery. Here's our starting point, Place Gambetta. Let me begin by introducing you to Léon Gambetta, who gave his name to this subway station and place. Gambetta was a French lawyer and politician of Italian origin. He was well known for his opposition to Napoleon III. Gambetta was elected in this area during the Third Republic, which replaced Napoleon III after the disastrous Franco-Prussian War. There was a huge statue erected to his honor, which used to stand in one of the courtyards of the Louvre in central Paris. But during the Vichy government in 1941, the metal parts of the statue were melted down. And after the war, the statue was disassembled. Now, the remaining parts of the statue are here in this square, and they were installed here in 1982 on the centennial of Gambetta's death. After being removed from the courtyard of the Louvre, the statue remained in the warehouse until the early 1980s. That's when what was left of the statue was installed here in the square Edouard Vaillant, a small park that's behind the town hall of the 20th arrondissement. Léon Gambetta was an immensely popular figure, especially for the people of Belleville, who elected him to the National Assembly. So this seems a perfect location for his statue. The mairie in the 20th arrondissement on Place Gambetta was built in the late 19th century. It actually replaces the earlier one, which was in an old nightclub or guinguette, quite appropriate for the neighborhood. But as more people began living here, they realized they needed a serious town hall, so they built this one. The town hall of the 20th arrondissement is a symbol of the expansion of Paris. By 1860, the growth of Paris meant that the city was overcrowded and increasingly dysfunctional. The Emperor, Napoleon III, wanted to build a city that would rival London, so he hired Baron Haussmann to reorganize the city. Haussmann annexed the villages which surrounded Paris, so that 8 new arrondissements were added to the 12 that already existed. Here, the village of Belleville-Charonne became the 20th arrondissement. But though Belleville has been part of Paris for over a century and a half, it's never lost its identity. Let's stroll out from Place Gambetta and head north on Pyrenees Street. This road is actually 3.5 kilometers long. It's the second longest street in Paris after the Rue de Vaugirard. Now, 3.5 kilometers, barely over 2 miles, isn't very long for a city street. But in Paris, a street can go on for miles, but its names will change every few blocks. So when walking around, pay attention to the street names. It's easy to get lost. Right now, we're on Ménilmontant Street. To the east, the street name changes to Rue Oberkampf. It's not always easy to navigate in Paris and keep track of the street names, but you get used to it quickly, and the tangling streets make strolling a never-ending discovery. When major construction work transformed Paris in the 19th century, many workers and artisans were driven out from slums near Notre Dame in the middle of the city. Some of these workers found new housing in the eastern districts, over here, in neighborhoods like this one. Belleville has always been a source of inspiration for artists. You've probably seen photos from here, from some of the great photographers like Robert Doisneau and Willy Ronas. Daniel Panac, one of today's best-known French writers, has set several novels here. And then there are the singers. Maurice Chevalier, one of the greats of the French music hall, began his career here. And the woman who discovered Maurice Chevalier, Edith Piaf. This is the Place Edith Piaf. The famous French singer was born in this area. There's a statue to her behind me. And it's actually really appropriate to have an outdoor space named for her because she started singing at a really young age to accompany her circus performer father. There's even a bar Edith Piaf, the far end of the place. This is a great place to soak in the local vibe of the neighborhood. It's a good place to have a coffee or a drink in the afternoon, especially when the weather's warm, because you can actually sit out on the place. The bar is filled with photographs from all kinds of times in Edith Piaf's life. Edith Piaf was actually born right near here, either in the street, which is the legend she liked to cultivate, or in the hospital just next door. And I happen to know a secret. I know exactly where we can find out the truth about where she was born. A little way from Gambetta, one of Edith Piaf's former apartments has become a small museum devoted to her life. She lived very briefly at number 5 Rue Crespin du Gast. Just over a year she spent here in 1933, and now her apartment has been converted into a museum by the building's owner, who's a great fan of Piaf. It's a private museum, so we phoned for a special appointment. Welcome to a museum dedicated to the life of singer Edith Piaf. Incredible collection of objects put together by Monsieur Bernard Marchois, who's a fan of Edith Piaf and inspired by her music. He actually met the singer before she died. Now, what's funny about Edith Piaf is she was tiny. This is her actual height. She was known as the Little Sparrow because she was so fragile, but she had this huge voice. In fact, one of her husbands bought her a teddy bear that was exactly her height as a joke. Now, the apartment is filled with all kinds of objects that were important to Edith. I'm especially interested in this over here. Now, these were actually boxing gloves that belonged to one of the tragic love stories in Edith Piaf's life, because Edith had actually a very moving life filled with complicated events and several lovers. One of the men she fell most madly in love with was a boxer who died tragically in a plane accident. So it's interesting here in the museum, there's all kinds of performance things and portraits about Edith, but there's also these tiny personal mementos that meant so much to her. Mr. Marchois has all kinds of dresses and accessories that belong to Edith Piaf, including this beautiful striped dress that Edith wore to a soiree. There's a photo attached of her wearing this very dress, with a lovely fur jacket on top of it. But really, the dress that is the pièce de résistance of the museum and is the one that everybody really makes the pilgrimage here to see is in this other room. Now, the most important thing in the museum is this dress. It's one of Edith Piaf's performance dresses. She always wore black dresses on stage. In fact, her dress is so iconic that you could compare it to Charlie Chaplin's cane. It's really her signature that everybody knew to recognize her by. So to have an actual dress she wore on stage is an incredible thing to see. It's really moving. The museum is only 2 rooms, but it is packed with information about Edith Piaf's life and times. You can read letters to her various musicians and composer friends because Edith was really generous with her stardom. In fact, you can't leave this museum without humming one of Edith Piaf's hits, La Vie en Rose. I always like to imagine Edith Piaf being driven around Paris by one of her many devoted lovers. I wonder if she ever wandered off the streets of the city into the more hidden country-style neighborhoods around Gambetta and Belleville, which we're going to explore right after this. We're in atmospheric Paris, visiting the neighborhoods surrounding the metro stations. Today, we're at Metro Gambetta in the popular and friendly neighborhood of Belleville. This is the poetically named Campagne à Paris, which looks and feels like an old village. It's just up from Gambetta, and in fact, it was purpose-built as workers' housing during part of the population boom in the neighborhood. Is a city you need to know how to explore because it's filled with small, secret places that aren't always easy to find. Sometimes you have to take a chance and climb a staircase even if you're not sure where it leads. The Campagne à Paris, or the countryside in Paris, is definitely one of those little-known areas, not visited by many tourists. But arriving in the streets, you'll be delighted by the quiet. It's hard to believe that the highway with all its noisy traffic is only a few minutes' walk away. The countryside in Paris is a real estate project that began in the early 20th century. Construction was suspended during World War I in 1906, and the project was finally inaugurated in 1926. It's a very small district with only 100 houses, but definitely take a moment to stroll here and soak in the lovely, relaxing ambiance. There are conveniently very few cars on these small roads, other than those belonging to the residents. The tramway is the latest addition to the metro and transport system in Paris. It actually circles the entire city, and at all the important stops, there's a public art installation. Here, we're at Porte de Bagnolet, and the installation is by American sculptor Mark Handforth. It's called Twisted Lamppost Star. With its subways, trains, and buses, the transit system in Paris is ideal for visitors. There's no need to rent a car to visit this city. Even before the arrival of the subway in the early 20th century, the city was served by an extensive network of trams. These operated between 1855 and 1938 and now have returned to service since the early 1990s. The Twisted Lamppost Star is one of 18 works of art that are scattered along the tramway. The artist created many monumental works based on urban elements, such as this one. The best-known attraction of the area around Gambetta Metro is the famous cemetery Père Lachaise, the largest cemetery inside Paris. No surprise, there are many flower shops and funeral homes in the neighborhood. In France, these companies are called pompes funèbres. La pompe means that it's associated with serious ceremony, and funèbre, of course, means funeral. But before exploring the realm of the dead, let's grab a bite to eat at nearby Père Lachaise on Boulevard de Ménilmontant. La Mère Lachaise is one of the many cafes in Paris that serve traditional French cuisine. But you can also stop in for a quick coffee or glass of wine at the counter. But personally, I like to stop in here for lunch because I know their salads are fantastic. The restaurant is called Mère Lachaise, which is, of course, a play on the great cemetery Père Lachaise, just a couple of blocks away. But, in fact, the great actress Sarah Bernhardt was called La Mère Lachaise by soldiers in the First World War because she had her leg amputated towards the end of her life, and she went to visit the front lines to encourage the French troops and to recite Molière to them and to sing to them. And she would be carried out there in a chair because she only had one leg. And the soldiers called her La Mère Lachaise, the mother chair. Merci. Oh, ça a l'air super. Bon appétit. Merci. So I ordered what the French call a big salad, which means it's not just a green salad, but in France, usually a big salad means you have cheese and meat in your salad. So it's a whole meal. There is some lettuce involved, some greenery, some tomatoes or carrots, but the main point of a big salad is to give you an excuse to put either goat cheese or Cantal cheese or meat like ham or duck on top of the lettuce. So I ordered a chef because it's the perfect thing for lunch. And I happen to know they make a very good chef salad here. To finish up lunch, we can always order a dessert, maybe a soft chocolate moelleux or a profiterole. A good dose of sugar should give us energy to explore the fascinating Père Lachaise cemetery with our wonderful guide Thierry Leroy. So Thierry, thank you so much for bringing me into the cemetery. I'm really looking forward to it. It's a gorgeous cemetery.
It's my pleasure.
So how did you start guiding people around Père Lachaise? I mean...
You know, when I was young, 13 years old, I go in the cemetery. It's not a problem for me, but my interest is about sculpture, epitaph, you know.
The art in the cemetery,
the art.
Okay.
But after I did a travel in Egypt.
You went to Egypt?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and what's the connection?
This is a big cemetery, you know, Egypt.
Okay, true.
If you have a good guide, it's very interesting, and we have a good guide.
When you were in Egypt, you had a good guide?
Yes.
Okay.
He says story about the pharaoh, and I say, I want to read it. This is a trigger of my passion now.
You discovered that you wanted to be a guide at that moment.
Yes.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
Now my tour is different because I tell story to the audience. So if you want, let me share with you my passion.
That would be great. Let's go. That sounds great. We're heading into a cemetery filled with stories, sculptures, and beautiful landscape in the company of professional Père Lachaise guide Thierry, who will introduce us to some of the most famous tenants right after this. We're exploring Paris, one metro stop at a time. Today, we began at Metro Gambetta in Belleville in the eastern part of the city. This is the location of the famous Père Lachaise cemetery, where all sorts of celebrities are buried. Opened in 1804, the Père Lachaise is the largest cemetery in Paris. I'm here with Thierry Leroy, a guide who's just as comfortable in the company of the dead as he is with the living. The cemetery of Père-Lachaise is one of the many accomplishments of Napoleon I, who once said every citizen has the right to be buried regardless of his race or religion. Just before the Revolution, the centrally located Cimetière des Innocents was closed because of unsanitary conditions, which left Paris in need of a new cemetery. So Napoleon chose this site outside city walls. The site of Père-Lachaise was the former home of Père de Lachaise, the Jesuit priest who was the confessor of Louis XIV. Since the opening of the cemetery in 1804, more than 70,000 people have been buried here, and many cats live here as well. So we're going up to see Oscar Wilde's grave.
Yes, we're
Wonderful
right.
playwright. Yeah.
Yes, I love this grave, but we have a bad story about this because there is a ritual. People come here to kiss.
To kiss the sculpture. This tradition of kissing the tombstone of Oscar Wilde is very much in the spirit of the famous playwright, but the grave had to be cleaned so often it began to deteriorate. So now it's surrounded by plexiglass to protect it. It's an ugly barrier.
I feel like we put Oscar in the second time in the jail, you know. He spent 2 years in the jail.
And it destroyed his health. Basically, jail killed him.
Yes.
So now to have it behind barriers again is, it hurts the soul. Wilde's sculpture is by Jacob Epstein, who called the figure a flying demon angel inspired by Assyrian figures in the British Museum. The sculpture originally had genitals. Oh, that's a terrible story. The story is that actually the genitalia that used to be on the sculpture is now a paperweight on the Irish ambassador's desk. That was the story. No proof whatsoever. But, I mean, poor Oscar Wilde. The monument has just suffered such indignities over time, but it is gorgeous to visit. It's very moving. So, who's next?
The next is Gertrude Stein, the famous Gertrude Stein.
The wonderful writer, the very complicated and interesting and influential writer. For Americans living in Paris in the early 20th century, Gertrude Stein was a real celebrity. Writer, poet, and a great collector of art, Stein was the friend of Picasso and Hemingway. During World War II, young GIs made a point of visiting Stein for tea. The writer was a key figure of the avant-garde movement. What's wonderful about Gertrude Stein's grave also is that people leave little notes. Thierry was pointing out all the rituals people have. Someone's written a note saying a rose is a rose is a rose. Very famous citation from Gertrude Stein. And someone's written, "You're still an inspiration to us." Very moving.
We are in front of the Edith Piaf grave.
Right, the wonderful singer from this neighborhood. There's all these names on the tombstone, so...
She's buried with her father and her husband,
Okay.
Théophanie Norbocas.
Okay.
It was a singer too. The song.
Edith Piaf liked singers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And she's buried with another person, his child.
Now, the story of the daughter is very tragic. Edith had a baby who died before reaching the age of 2, and this baby she named Marcel. And Marcel is buried with Edith Piaf. Now, the strange thing is that when Edith had this baby, she had not yet met the love of her life, who was a boxer named Marcel. So weirdly, she named this baby the same name that the love of her life, the boxer, eventually had, and he also died tragically. So there was a lot of tragedy in the life of Edith, but there's also so much music and just such an important visited grave because of all the music she gave to France. Next, Thierry wants us to see an actual historic site, not simply a tomb. In the spring of 1871, the Parisians took up arms to overthrow the openly monarchist National Assembly. The movement was called the Paris Commune, which called for a return to the values of the Revolution of 1789. But after barely 2.5 months, the commune was brutally repressed and the revolt actually ended right here in Père-Lachaise cemetery, where the last insurgents fled. At the end of the fighting, 147 survivors were shot in front of this wall, called the Wall of the Federated.
So now we arrive to Molière and La Fontaine.
Molière, the wonderful playwright. Wow, okay. But this is a curious tomb because Molière died in 1673, La Fontaine died in 1695, but the Père-Lachaise cemetery only opened in 1804. Thierry's been explaining why Molière and the famous fable writer La Fontaine are in Père-Lachaise. Their bones were moved here in order to drum up publicity for the new cemetery. Because Napoleon opened Père-Lachaise, no one wanted to be buried out here. It was too far from the city. They hadn't gotten into the habit of making this trek out to Père-Lachaise. But once they started burying famous people here, like Molière, the French Shakespeare, buried in Père-Lachaise, suddenly everybody wanted to be buried here. So it was a super successful publicity scheme. Molière would understand. You know, he had to work with the king. He had to put up with a lot of things like that. So he'd probably understand.
Now we're going to see the most higher monument of this cemetery.
Ah, the highest one, that's right, you told me about it. So it's this crazy obelisk, huh?
And the whole cemetery of Paris is 21 meters.
Right, it's 21 meters, okay.
Yes. And if you are in the Eiffel Tower, in Montmartre, in Arc de Triomphe, you can see.
Really? You
Yes.
can see this from the
Yes.
Eiffel Tower? That's amazing.
Yes.
I like that.
It's
That's
very
great.
nice.
Despite the size of the monument, its owner, Félix de Beaujour, was an obscure diplomat. But his enduring obelisk quickly became a place for women to meet their lovers in the 19th century. It was especially famous for illicit meetings between society ladies and very young soldiers. Even today, the cemetery has to regularly change the locks that close this crypt. Let's go visit the most popular grave in this whole cemetery next. Can you guess? Here are some clues. His name begins with James Douglas, and he was famous in the 1960s. Come with me to discover the most popular grave right after this. We're in fascinating Paris, exploring the neighborhood around the Gambetta metro station, which is an access for one of the most famous Parisian cemeteries, Père-Lachaise. So you're bringing me to the star of the cemetery, huh?
Yes, the star of this cemetery is Jim Morrison.
So Jim Morrison, the singer of the Doors, is the most visited grave?
Yes, yes, yes. Everybody come here want to see the grave of Jim Morrison. So many people come here just for him.
So it's over here?
Yes, right here.
Okay. So it's here. Because of the large number of visitors, Jim Morrison's tomb is surrounded by fencing. His tombstone's often stolen, and even the tree right next to the grave had to be protected. All around the tomb, there's graffiti, perhaps a way to pay tribute to the rock star who died in 1971. He died in Paris.
Yes, he died in Paris, so he can be buried in a French cemetery. You have to die or live.
So if you live your life in Paris, you could
Yes.
also be buried here?
Yes.
Okay. So that's why Gertrude Stein or other people are buried here, even though they're foreigners. Even if you don't have Thierry to guide you, it's easy to grab a map at the entrance to the cemetery. You can explore amazing history here, politicians, writers, locals, foreigners, all kinds of people to remember. Because Père-Lachaise is such a large cemetery, there are many doors leading out of the area into the neighborhood. This particular small door leads to Rue de la Réunion, which takes us down to Place de la Réunion. Réunion was recently spiffied up, and it's a lovely place to check out the atmosphere of the neighborhood. On Thursdays and Saturdays in the mornings, there's a lovely market here, a real villagey feeling. And any time in the week, you can drop by here and sit in the very pretty gardens to relax and people watch. Marché Réunion is one of many public markets held weekly across Paris. There's a wide variety of fresh products that come directly from the producers, but also because this is a very diverse neighborhood, you can find ingredients for all kinds of specialty African, Arab, and Asian dishes. The market is full of life, and traders are always ready to advise you on how best to prepare their food. It's a real festival of colors, noise, and of course odors in the midst of a relaxed atmosphere. Place de la Réunion's little garden is a great place to enjoy what you bought at the market. It's decorated with lavender, rosemary, all kinds of local herbs, which is even more appropriate for the market. And it's a nice place to chat with people whose kids are playing here and whose dogs are walking. Let me show you an unusual aristocratic pleasure house just up the street on Rue de Bagnolet. It's a beautiful vestige of the 18th century Pavillon de l'Ermitage. The Pavillon de l'Ermitage was once a tiny folly in the middle of a vast estate belonging to an aristocrat. But these days, all that's left are the beautiful gardens and this small building. Welcome to what remains of the castle of Bagnolet, a huge property once occupied a good part of the 20th arrondissement in the 1700s here. A folie is the name that's given to a small house on a mansion's property, and follies like this were originally reserved for enjoyable activities like parties and picnics. The castle of Bagnolet once had 4 of these pleasure houses, but the Pavillon de l'Ermitage is the only one that's still standing today. This pavilion was the site of a great conspiracy during the Revolution. It was here that plotters met to try to save the king and Marie Antoinette before they were executed. But the conspiracy was discovered, and although the mastermind escaped, he left his mistress and his 7 co-conspirators here to be guillotined. Built in the 1720s, the pavilion is not heated and is used only in the summer. The murals in the gallery and the hall are the work of Jean Valade, a renowned portraitist of the early 18th century. The charming and delicate compositions foreshadow a style that would later be called Rococo. The gate behind me has the initials FP for François Pomerol, who is the wealthy candy maker who purchased this after the Revolution. At the end of the 19th century, the Pavillon de l'Ermitage was sold to the Public Assistance Organization that manages hospitals, who turned it into a small retirement home. Renovated in the 1970s, it's now managed by an organization called the Friends of the Hermitage. It opened to the public in 2005. The Pavillon de l'Ermitage is not the only reminder that the French nobility of the 18th century lived in the area. On Ménilmontant Street, the Baudouin Pavilion is another one of these buildings. It takes its name from one of the original owners, Nicolas Carré-Baudouin. When he inherited the building in 1770, he added pillars, columns inspired by the architecture of Italian villas. The pavilion has had a succession of owners during its history. The Prix Goncourt is one of the most famous literary prizes in France, and its creators, Jules and Edmond Goncourt, spent their childhood here. They have magical memories of this place. Later, the building became the property of a religious congregation who set up an orphanage and a home for troubled youth on these premises. The pavilion was finally bought by the city of Paris in the early 2000s before being expensively restored. The building has been open to the public since 2007. There are now 4 exhibition halls, an auditorium, and the Carré de Baudouin Pavilion has become an excellent cultural center for the 20th arrondissement. It regularly hosts concerts and exhibitions of all kinds. Paintings, graphics, sculptures, and photography, all the artistic variations are welcome within these walls. Since the space is government-run, the events and exhibitions presented here are free, which is great for visitors too. The aim is to promote culture to as many people as possible. The garden around the house has also been refurbished and offers a place to relax as well as a playground for young guests, nicely transforming a place reserved for a privileged few in the 1700s into a place of vibrant culture that's open to all today in the 21st century. This neighborhood has such a variety of architecture, from 18th century extravagance to the elegant modernism of the early 20th century. Come visit a church with me right after this. We're in Paris, a city with an extraordinary religious heritage. While visiting landmarks such as Notre-Dame de Paris and Sacré-Cœur in Montmartre, you might also want to visit some of the lesser-known churches, basilicas, temples, even mosques and chapels. Many of them are open to the public, but they're not always well known. This is one of the true secrets of Paris, an Art Deco church tucked on the far side of Père Lachaise. This is the Church of Saint-Jean-Bosco. The church was built between 1933 and 1937. It's a beautiful example of architectural and artistic research for the Art Deco movement. It's a concrete building, painted white, and its bell tower rises to 175 feet. The design was inspired by the Notre-Dame Raincy, a similar Art Deco church built in the 1920s in a town near Paris. The building of the Church of St. John Bosco was approved within a comprehensive plan to build religious buildings, launched by Cardinal Verdier in the early 1930s. Since then, more than 300 churches and community centers have been built in the arrondissement of Paris and its suburbs, which is surprising considering the religious commitment of the French has been waning over the past 100 years. Be sure to step inside the church. It's a beautifully preserved example of Art Deco. The 1930s were, of course, a period of great economic depression, where expensive materials were difficult to come by. Unusual materials such as onyx and bronze for the construction of the altar and pulpit were used. The frescoes, sculptures, and stained glass windows were made by some of the best craftsmen in Paris, specializing in religious art of the time. The church is dedicated to St. John Bosco, an Italian priest who devoted his life to the education of disadvantaged youth in the 19th century. He was canonized in 1934. He's also the patron saint of printers and apprentices. Let's stroll a bit further from Metro Gambetta. In the 19th century, this neighborhood was a small village in the countryside surrounding the capital. Today, a bit of this country atmosphere remains in its streets. Sometimes the streets are very narrow. Here, the Douai passage is the tiniest in Paris. It measures only 32 inches wide at the beginning. Its name, Douai, means source in Old French. It testifies to the presence of numerous water sources under the pavement of the neighborhood. No wonder the city is so notoriously damp. While we visit the countryside of Paris, keep your eyes open for little pieces of paradise that don't feel at all like a big city. Here's Villa Georgina, a small street lined with trees and homes, all of which have their own gardens. Here's another well-known road in Belleville and one of my favorites, the Passage des Soupirs, which means the passageway of sighs, which was once a small country road that has managed to keep its personality despite being incorporated into the big city. Today, the poetically named street leads to a community garden that's currently being rebuilt. This is Saint-Germain-de-Charonne, a church that has been standing here since the 12th century. This was once the heart of a small village, quite a ways from the city of Paris. This church is one of the few that has managed to keep its own small private cemetery. Most churches within Paris don't have cemeteries, so this is really unusual. In the cemetery here are buried several people who died during the Commune, as well as a highly suspect character who claimed he was the secretary to the revolutionary figure Robespierre. This church actually has a bell named Germaine because all the church bells have their own names, and this bell has been in the church steeple since 1606 and still rings. Belleville has a vibrant artistic and cultural life. There are numerous art galleries, cinemas, theaters, and spaces for all kinds of music. To enjoy the mood of this unique neighborhood in the French capital, let's grab a drink right after this. We're in Paris. After a day of strolling through the winding Belleville streets, let's enjoy a drink in one of the neighborhood's dynamic cultural venues. Welcome to the Bellevilloise, the first workers' cooperative in Paris. It opened in 1877 and continued through to the 1930s. Then it closed. But the building has recently been reopened as a fabulous music and arts venue. This room is called the Hall of the Olive Trees. It's a lovely place to hang out, have a drink, bite to eat. And every night there is at least a singer and sometimes a band. There's all kinds of music in this space, from hip-hop to swing music, from classical music to jazz. You can hear all kinds of things here, and you can even see burlesque shows. And in the upstairs part of the hall, there are vernissage, art openings, and tonight I'm going to check out some new work. Macabe is the artist tonight. She lives in Montreuil, which is just on the edge of eastern Paris. There's a lot of artist lofts out there. She's also a singer. She's a jazz singer concentrating on music from the 1930s into the 50s. And the Bellevilloise is one of the places that actually does music like that, does swing nights, all that kind of era, real specialty for here. And so she's sung in this space, and now she's got a vernissage of her visual art in this space. She actually painted the ones on the wall behind me specifically for this space. She was thinking the Hall of the Olive Trees, so she wanted paintings with trees, this sort of jungle, voyeuristic feeling, because, as she said, this is a lieu de passage. It's a place people pass through, going to things. It's an event place, so she wanted to create art specifically appropriate to the environment here. And she says she tries to do that with her work, to try and fit her fantastic creatures, her sci-fi people, into the place they're going to be showing in. In addition to the Olive Hall, there are spaces for concerts, exhibitions, and conferences. Spread over 3 levels, the spaces are flexible to adapt to all kinds of festivals and events. They can adapt to any style of function. In addition, the Bellevilloise remains true to its roots by organizing a cooperative working organic market every Saturday from 11 to 4. The good thing with the Bellevilloise is it is right in the heart of the neighborhood, but it's off the beaten tourist track, so you really have a sense of place. You get to meet people. It's very relaxed. I got here a little bit early to have a drink, but you can also arrive late with all the French people who always get here late. And there's a club, so you can while the night away on the bottom floor of the Arts Center. love that place, but I'm going to go home before the band starts tonight because we walked so far in Père Lachaise, which is such a wonderful place to stroll and learn about history. And anyway, I can go home with all the music of Edith Piaf in my head. Let's see what we can get up to next time on Paris Next Stop.